Thank you so much for coming to today's BethAnn series speaker. We are so pleased to have Dr. BethAnn McLaughlin as the Inclusivity in the Biosciences Association invited speaker. A bit about Dr. McLaughlin. She is an assistant professor in the departments of neurology and pharmacology at Vanderbilt and specializes in mitochondrial and redox stress signaling in neurological injury and disease. She's received major funding from the NIH, the DoD, and several other major funding sources that would be too many to list. Her career was sidetracked in 2014 when she experienced retaliation after being a witness in a Title IX investigation. Recently, the National Academy of Sciences Gold Ribbon panel revealed that her experience was all too common for women in science and medicine. All too many women in these fields are sexually harassed, very few report, and the consequences of reporting is very frequently retaliation. The rates of assault and harassment of those we seek to include most include also people of color, LGBTQI individuals, and individuals with disability, whose effects can be far more devastating and even more profound. So Dr. McLaughlin has moved from the more traditional avenues of resisting these kind of facts of academia as it stands, and moved towards more hilarious and irreverent blogging. From this became a leader in the MeToo movement and the founder of MeTooSTEM. As a result of her work, Dr. McLaughlin is the 2018 recipient of the Louise Hanson Marshall Award for Science Advocacy, and in November 2018, she won the MIT Media Lab Disobedience Award. She will talk about MeTooSTEM, the need to disobey unjust and unsafe policies in academia, and the actions we need to take in our departments and scientific societies in order to make science safe, inclusive, and welcoming. She also has MeTooSTEM and MeTooSTEM Ally swag available. Today, if you are on Twitter and are interested in tweeting about this talk, please use the hashtag MeTooStemTalk. You can also follow Inclusivity in the Biosciences Association at IBA_VU. You can also email iba@vanderbilt.edu to be added to our email list, or sign up at the list at front to be added. We also have a sheet going around where if you could please record your VU email address. If you don't have your card to swipe in, that helps us kind of get recognition for having this event and potentially get more funding for future things in the future. We will have an Inclusivity in the Biosciences Association General Interest Meeting on February 28th from 3 to 4 p.m. in U8202 with free ice cream. So, with no further ado, I'm very pleased to introduce Dr. BethAnn McLaughlin.
Hey friends, is this working? Yeah. I promise not to step on you if anybody wants to sit on the floor. I mostly promise. I'm somewhat coordinated. First of all, I want to thank the folks from the Inclusivity group for inviting me. This is actually the first time that I've been invited on my own campus to talk about this issue, which is far too prevalent for all of us in science. All of us are going to be mentoring, and the cost that this has incurred on being able to represent people safely in our environment is too high. So I want to talk to you a little bit about some of the work that I've done. It turns out that if you make a scientist mad enough, they will set up a really, really snarky Twitter account and investigate you and figure out what it is about this system that allows these things to go forward. So I start my talks the same way, which is recognizing that not everybody who should be here is here. That while I feel safe in this space, mostly, that there are too many people who've been pushed out of science because they were made to feel less than, that they were diminished, that their lives were already difficult, and rather than appreciating what they could bring to us, we diminished them and made them feel unsafe. And Title IX has been in effect for 46 years. So I like to start my talks with 46 seconds of silence, recognizing the people that aren't here right now. Having won a disobedience award, I like to start out talking about disobedience, one, because they give me a pile of money and I should. And I look at what Thoreau had to say about it, and it really resonates that the minority is powerless while it conforms to the majority. And my sort of hot take on that is that every person who's speaking truth to academic power is getting their ass kicked by administrators and losing credibility as a scientist for not working, being knocked by some allies for being in the spotlight, for not saying things right, but then take a stand anyway. I think that being in academics is incredibly important as a tool to change society and to impact lives of young people in a really positive way. And so much of academics right now is about silence and about staying in your lane. And I would encourage you to know the whole highway. You're way too smart, you're way too awesome, we've spent too much money educating you, and so get out there. Your voice matters. Your voice matters not just for you, but for the person next to you and the person that you're training, and who we want to be. We don't want to be a room full of white people. We just don't. We're better. We have better ideas. When we pull everyone to the table, and not just have them there, but make them feel safe in that space. So I encourage people to science like you mean it. That you don't do the things when they're easy. You do the things when they're hard. You won't have enough money. You won't have enough friends. And you certainly will never have enough security. I didn't get to be 50 to be rated by an undergrad with a chili pepper. I could hear an amen. We are in the South. So that's gone. You're welcome. So what should it look like when we're valuing these things? When we're saying we want you at the table? That we're better humans when we live the experience that looks like the rest of the world's experience, so that we are not in some ridiculous ivory tower that people have come to respect less and less. So when someone reports sexual assault on this campus, and it's not just this campus, you saw the intro slides, it's all campuses. What should it look like? It should look like an emergency. We should deploy resources. We should provide health services and counseling and career help and legal assistance to help them navigate what will be one of the defining moments of their lives. We should think about safety. We should isolate the accused. They should have a no contact and a restraining order given to them. Individuals should have security details as they see fit. If they are feeling stalked and harassed and retaliated against, they need all of these things. And then we should involve law enforcement. I'm so over hearing about professors who have raped students, and why is the FBI not there? That's insane to me. Why are the police not there? And this is an incredibly important problem in our society if we want to be respected. If we want people to look up to universities, but yet you can go onto a college campus and be a professor and hurt a student in some of the most vile ways, and you get a slap on the hand, that's unacceptable. And yet
And at the end of this process, we should really be thinking about restorative justice. We should be thinking about really practical things of paid leave for disability. And yes, punishment for the guilty. Restorative justice is a theme that has really resonated with me in the last few years in thinking about what we're not doing for individuals who are sexually assaulted, harassed, retaliated against, grabbed, groped. That we really take a victims first approach in thinking about their safety. And repairing the harm that's done, not just to that individual, but to the person who collaborated with them and trusted them with their students. To the department that hired them and they looked like a good guy. To the students who looked up and saw that person in lecture and felt like they were safe. Those are conversations we need to be having. That's what restorative justice looks like. This is who we should be. We're not. In academia, what really happens with sexual harassment, retaliation, grabbing, groping, raping, is that officers will come, they're paid by the university, that mental and physical health resources paid by the university also come, that university defense lawyers in the EAD and Title IX offices come and talk to you. They don't record what you have to say. They don't offer any representation at all for you. There's no advocate in the room. And you don't get to know the outcome. No one else gets to know the outcome. Do you know the one thing they tell you that's most important? We got it. Just be quiet. Okay, we got it. Let's not ruffle any more feathers. I don't want to make you feel bad. Everybody's looking at you. Just don't talk about it. Is there any other condition where someone is hurt, where someone is ill? We say, I'm sorry, you've got cancer, but we talk about it to heal communities. We talk about it to find our people. It is devastating to tell victims of sexual harassment or any other crime not to talk about it. They should have those resources. They should have their colleagues. They shouldn't lose their friends. Because if you tell them not to talk about it, you end up with a crazy bitch. Yelling at you. But she gave you swag. Too often the consequence, instead of termination or jail, is a black letter, a special term I found out about, and does not come from Hogwarts. I still don't know what it means. And then we pass the trash. Some other university takes them, we take their guy. And it goes. And the one thing that has been made clear to me in talking to literally thousands of victims who've been sexually harassed is not a single one of them says, Title IX was great. I mean, my process, I wouldn't wish it on anyone, but I felt healed. Like, there was justice done. Not one. Please show me this person. It's not okay. It's a terrible way to treat our students. The only other systems in our country that we allow to have some secret hearings are the military, the Catholic Church, and ourselves. How's it going for the Catholic Church? The Catholic Church made every single mistake we need to learn from. They moved them from place to place as they preyed on people. They silenced victims. They denied their reality. They kicked them out. They broke their lives. We are better than that. And so I want to start this conversation in MeTooSTEM land with an apology. An apology from me to you. That I'm 51 and I didn't do better sooner. That I saw people being sexually harassed and diminished and hurt. And I saw gender bias. But do you know what? I had it. I could take it. I could roll with the boys. I wish I had done better sooner. And there are a lot of apologies to be had and given. And I'll talk to you about one that I got last week. But my issues and these issues are things that we've talked about more and more because of the National Academy's report. And one of my friends, Julie LeBarkin, who's at Michigan State, has assembled a database of faculty and staff who have been found guilty or are currently under investigation for sexual misconduct. And these are people who are gainfully employed within academia. Almost all of the reports in her database are of individuals who have preyed upon students. How many folks do you think are in that database? We've got 4 choices. Collect a little data here. 150, 300, 700, 3,000. 150? Oh, I like a cynical audience. 300? 700? Y'all win, but I like the 3,000. Here's the important thing. When we look at these numbers and compare them to what Yale was forced to share as part of a punishment that they received for how poorly they were treating people in sexual harassment cases, it turned out that the number of individuals we knew about was 5 to 10% of the total population of people who had been accused and were active investigations or had already been found guilty. So think of this not as a 700. Think of this as a 5 to 10%. I'd encourage you to look at Julie's database. It's under Geocognition Research Laboratory. She is a data wonk, and this is how she's chosen to tackle this problem. God love her. I've taken a slightly different path. In thinking about who these folks are. These are not just sort of individuals who are not having a huge impact that we can somehow isolate in a small corner of an old research building. These are incredibly prominent scientists that we're talking about. And until we take the trash out, it's really hard to deal with gender inequality. It's really hard to deal with diversity and representation. This is one of my favorite articles because it made my mom crazy. It starts out with BethAnn McLaughlin can still remember the moment, as she puts it, when she lost her mind. And it was about a campaign that I started when I realized that it wasn't just report here and report there and report there. These folks had some commonalities that they weren't dying out, that their legacy was incredibly long and hurtful. And the story that made me crazier was Inder Verma. You guys know Inder Verma? Mm-hmm. So Inder Verma is a cancer geneticist who was at the Salk Institutes. And he had been there for 40 years. The whole time, literally from the second week he was there were incidents of harassment and retaliation and harming women and diminishing women. And he got millions of dollars over the years, not just to study cancer, but to train people to be more like him in the way that he studies cancer. And not only did he get this money from National Institutes of Health, his peers raised him up and said, this is who we love. This guy. Be more like this guy. And the way that we do that in science is by putting you in a scientific society, the best of the best that we have to offer, the national academies. This is our Academy of the Arts. This is the cream of the crop. So not only did they put him in the National Academies of Science, but then they put him in charge of his journal, their journal, PNAS. Well-known predator. Well-known. You literally couldn't go in to Salk and talk to a woman and not hear stories of watch your back. The pain of this hit me hard because the new head of the National Academies of Science is the first woman that the National Academy of Sciences has had as president, Marcia McNutt. And she used to be the editor of Science. And when she was the editor of Science, she wrote an editorial saying scientific societies can and should combat harassment. Which I guess was easier said than done. Because Inder Verma was a member of the National Academy of Sciences. Not only is Inder Verma a member of the National Academy of Sciences, so is Tom Jessel. So are 4 other men who have had public, scathing indictments of their predation against women, particularly against trainees. And there is no plan at all to remove them. The Academy of the Arts has kicked out Roman Polanski, has kicked out Bill Cosby, and these guys, the most rational folks, right, who are supposed to be able to look at data, we can't kick these guys out. We are not supposed to be these precious individuals who don't look at the facts. Isn't that supposed to be the arts? Aren't they supposed to say, like, we can't get rid of Woody Allen, like he's a special snowflake and he's got a hot take on the world we all need to listen to? Right? There are more than enough scientists. There's more than enough genius to go around. So I decided to ask Marcia. All right, I'm definitely aging out my audience here. Marcia, Marcia, Marcia. Who's got me? Anybody? Thank you. Thank you, Brady Brunch. Just tell the Academy members that they have to present a letter from their administration saying that they haven't been found guilty of Title IX violations in order to stay in the National Academy of Sciences. Do you know what she said? Word to God, I thought she was going to send me an edible arrangement for a long time because I thought she just didn't know. She did not. She wrote me back and said, guilty until proven innocent? Is that the American way? These dudes are guilty. We found them guilty. We give these people one system of justice, Title IX. And then we're like, well, guilty until proven innocent? By what? By what? There's nothing else we can use. 7 other people sent me edible arrangements, I'm fine. The irony that this is National Academy of Sciences burns because they put out the report, the gold standard, the 2-year report that says 6 out of 10 women in science, in medicine, will be sexually harassed, will be grabbed, groped, raped, cornered, retaliated against by their peers. 50% of women in medical school in the first 2 years will have a physical encounter they do not want by a superior. They wrote that report, and they still won't get rid of their own people who have been found guilty, that we know of. The folks who are most vulnerable are the folks that we say that we want the most. The folks who are not white guys. The folks who are queer family. People of color. And yet they're the most vulnerable, and they're the most preyed upon. Science like you mean it. Hire like you mean it. Mentor like you mean it. Write a scathing petition like you're an idiot. Me and 5,500 of my best friends on Twitter started a petition and said, hey, this is not who we are, National Academy of Sciences. You're embarrassing us. You're embarrassing us. They have a member of the National Academy of Sciences who died 10 years ago, that they did an honorary piece celebrating his work, even though he spent 2 years in jail. Because when he was at remote field sites, he sexually molested small boys, and he went to jail for pedophilia. National Academy still celebrates him on their website. So what happens when you report sexual harassment? We started out talking about Title IX. You're gonna meet a white guy, and he's gonna tell you he's got it. He doesn't. Because this is a fundamental gap in the way that men and women communicate. Because when a guy says to you, I've got it, they mean, I'm gonna do something so freaking scary to that guy. I'm gonna call his boss. I'm gonna put him another black letter in his file. I'm gonna threaten his salary. I'm gonna scare him so bad in my world that he would never do that again. He's got it. He doesn't got it. The reason that you don't have it, kind men who are awesome enough to show up today, is when you say you have it, what you need to mean is, I'm going to use my power and authority to advocate for your safety recklessly. To do it like it's my job, it's my top priority. And I will do it in a transparent way to the best of my abilities. And then I'm going to check back in with you and see how you're doing. And I'm not just going to check in once, I'm going to check in a lot. And I'm going to have other eyes on you because I care. That is having it. Too often having it means going to Title IX and going to EAD. Who are these people? Oh, I have more information. They're not your lawyers. The university's lawyers. God forbid you get pushed down this road, which I'll describe to you, far enough, and it comes that you actually need to sue someone. All those records that you gave them are defense. All those lawyers that you talk to sit at the defense table. They don't sit on your side. They don't sit on the victim's side. This one hurts a little. I felt special, but you guys are special. Other people are not. One of the hard lessons is that there's this thing called risk assessment, which we don't have journal clubs on. And it basically comes down to a bunch of lawyers sit in a room and figure out how much of a pain in the ass you are. Boy, did they get that wrong. And figure out how much it costs to get rid of you. To close you off and push you out. None of the restorative justice, none of that. And when we talk about these lawsuits that are moving forward, who do you think pays if someone is found guilty of sexual harassment? Like, honest, legit question. Where do you think that money comes from? I thought it came from like the trust of the university. Like, you know, they've got a big bank or something that made undergrad housing better. It doesn't. It comes from insurers. And so many of these decisions are not even made at the university level. They're made by the insurance company that pressures the university, that says, yeah, no, you can drag her further. You can investigate her some more, because I still don't believe you. Because of course they don't want to, because they would have to pay. Pro tip, if you decide to file a Title IX complaint, and most people who've been sexually assaulted do not, file it federally, because it creates a paper trail. And people cannot push you down into an HR resolution. You can file it locally or you can file it federally. If you go to your university's website, any guesses where it's going? It's not federal. I like to call Title IX the secret sauce to make a crazy bitch. And Natalie Portman has one of my favorite quotes where she says, if a man calls a woman crazy, ask, what bad things did you do to her? Because there's no other part of this planet where someone can go and grab your ass, corner you, and it becomes some crazy secret thing in academics. If you're a professor and you grab a student's ass on campus, that becomes a Title IX problem. If you're a professor and you walk downtown on Broadway and you grab someone's ass, one, they're going to punch you in the face, and two, because it's Nashville, and two, it becomes a police matter. You're not going to punch the dude in the face because he's got more power than you do. But God love you. When Title IX doesn't work, your backup plan is EEOC, which is also in the Department of Education. Jessica Cantlin and Celeste Kidd used this like champions. They filed an enormous report outlining decades of abusive behavior at the University of Rochester in the departments of neuroscience, where they allowed a predator to push out 6 faculty members because he openly preyed on students. At a faculty retreat, he complained about what his students' vagina tasted like. That's a hella talk. When this fails, your other resource is the Department of Justice. So they can investigate whether or not your Title IX proceeding is going well, or you have complaints. And did I mention thousands of women and not one has told me going well? These are the active investigations and these are the resolved ones out to 2019. The Chronicle of Higher Education has a nice little thing where you can search and figure out if
a university you're interested in attending or being faculty at has open investigations. It takes a monster amount of stubborn to have gotten to this point. When you're like, nope, that's not justice, and that's not justice. These folks are warriors who have made these complaints. Do you know what happens if you're found to not be in compliance with Title IX at this level? That's why y'all have extra training. Because that's what they do to you. Everybody gets more training. Nobody's punished. We just train you more. That's the outcome of this. Do you know, does sexual harassment training work? Does it work for people who are sexual harassers in decreasing the frequency of the times that they grab, grope, assault? No. It does not. It just annoys the hell out of the rest of us. Your last choice is civil court. And these 7 women from Dartmouth who came down for the MIT Disobedience Awards did a $70 million lawsuit, which is the largest one yet, against the professors of the neuroscience department there. Again, for decades of grabbing and gripping. And raping, drugging and raping. So laws and money are the only thing that are going to change these. Take away the money from the harassables, trademark pending. Take away the money from the universities that hire, promote, and retain these folks. Go public so that there are no more non-disclosure agreements. Take away the money from the universities. Well, we need NIH to do that. They're a big funder, right? The only problem is that the head of ethics for NIH has gone out with the national academies and said, a consensual relationship between a professor and a trainee is defined in one in which there's an intent to marry. Because apparently it's the Handmaid's Tale. I'm sure all you trainees are lovely. I don't want to marry any of you. I don't want to live. Nothing personal. How do we know your intent? The intent of a drunk driver is to have some drinks and go home. We don't give a shit what your intent is. We care what the consequence is. Cussing in my head for swearing. I have to pay someone $1. So I went over Tabek's head and started speaking publicly about the bare minimum that NIH needed to do. That you don't get travel money, because I'm so tired of going to a meeting and running into my guy. And their behaviors are always worse when no one is there to back you up. No awards. Sorry, you're not the presidential king of awesome anymore. You don't get money for that. No training grants. It didn't work. You suck. And no NIH service. You don't get to be deciding who else gets money. There are others who say no grants. More power to you. I hope that happens. This is what I believe is actionable. So last week I met with the head of NIH, who was totally freaking terrified of me. And is a remarkably kind person. He also lives in a bubble. And do you know how I know that? Because he says I live in a bubble. And I believe him. But what he did was historic. He said, is this working group that I've invited you to speak at going to make a difference? And I said, no.
until you have actions and people in place and consequences. And I've already done them. I did your work. How much are we paying the working group? I will take it. But what he did was to apologize. Apologize for acting slowly. Apologizing for not hearing the voices. Apologize for not having an emergency fund. The same way as if your lab animals drowned in a hurricane. We deploy resources to you immediately to try to restore your career. We need to do the same thing for victims of sexual harassment because we want you. So I asked my little friends on Twitter, with all this cultural wokeness, what do you think, if you're a female, a person of color, a minority, LGBTQ+, do you think things are getting worse, about the same, or getting better in the last year? What percent of people do you think said getting better? 950-ish? Okay, you guys, like, you were hardcore on the 3,000. Quarter. And the comments, which I invite you to look at, are heartbreaking. It's not enough. It's too late for me. That's not okay. It's not okay. And I think this slide is really important given my conversation with the head of NIH. And P.S., I'm totally couching all my conversations like that from now on. But when I was talking to the head of NIH, they're like, could you just hand me a paper towel? This is really important because he wrote an editorial in Science 102 weeks ago and said, you will see a difference in sexual harassment enforcement from NIH in the weeks to months to come. And he seemed genuinely surprised when I said to him last week, what are you talking about? Either you're inept or you're lying. I can't say I'll do something in 100 weeks for NIH and have zero. Just say that. Like, you can't do that. Well, you can. And he seemed genuinely surprised that him saying he's got it, him saying we're serious now, isn't enough. It's not enough. And I hate that there has to be the hammer of consequences. But I like the money. They gave me money. This guy is my BFF. Reid Hoffman started a Disobedience Awards last year with a pediatrician who noticed that her patients in Flint, Michigan had pervasive developmental delays, and she just decided to go for it, paid her own money to have it tested in North Carolina. And they dragged her hard in Flint. They said she was a hysterical woman. They threatened every lawsuit and threw some at her. And we know that to be true, even though Flint still doesn't have clean water. So I got this award with Tarana Burke, the Queen, and Sherry Marks. Part of what I had done with that money is to start a nonprofit called MeTooSTEM. It started with sharing our stories. You'll see probably 75 or 100 stories up there where we ask 7 questions and personalize this experience. There's some statistics. My least favorite is that of the $37 billion that we give NIH, not a single dollar has been taken away from an investigator because he was sexually harassed
assaulted or retaliated against someone. When you're put on leave, they give it to you give your grants to your friends, people who hired you, people who collaborated with you, people who knew you were sort of a shit. And that's not cool. So, the goal of MeTooSTEM is to relentlessly advocate for safety, accountability, and transparency with regard to handling accusations and findings of sexual misconduct. I can't believe I had to start a nonprofit to have this really basic protection for my students. To support victims and enforce national filings, and inform supervisors, departments, and administrators that they got it is not the answer. To encourage reporting of funding agencies. Right now, NSF is the only foundation that will take reports of sexual misconduct. Give them anyway. Write your program officer. Write the head of NIH. What are they going to do? Send your email back? Tell them anyway. To create national awareness about the gaps in Title IX and making victims unsafe. To look at reporting to the Government Accountability Office that says you can't actually be in the middle of a Title IX investigation that's consuming 80% of your time and still be getting money off your grant. That's fraud. To require disclosures of Title IX and Title VII findings of sexual misconduct for grantees. Where your environment for your lab is not just how many centrifuges you have access to. It's how safe your people are. We have a lot of other allies in this battle. And this is where we really rely on men in a thing called the STEM Troll Alert. Because women in social media get dragged a lot, and guys are really reluctant to white knight it, right? Like, I'll come in and fix it. But this is a way that you can flag social media, and it creates a bot that alerts men that they can engage in the conversation with the guy who is telling you how you look and who you are and your science and but actually and blah blah blah, and they can play her asshole bingo with them. So I have tough questions that I'll just zip through, and then one last slide. Do we ask that there's an immediate administrative leave for people who have been found guilty? Is it that we remove anyone found guilty from positions of power and influence? What is the percent of initial complaints that get diverted to these non-reportable things? Okay, I'm doing a wrong thing, I'm finding my glasses, but you're in my hand. This is who you're listening to, people. Yay. To do an independent audit of the climate, where we're not just asking female faculty to do surveys, because that's a woman tax that I don't pay. To ask if people who are guilty of sexual misconduct are still nominated for awards. To think about what we're doing to restore the careers of victims. To ensure that potential employees don't have a history, to ask the question. To figure out if Title IX investigates witnesses and victims. And to think about whether or not we're actually promoting people within our culture. So I'm gonna stop there, and I'm gonna tell you something.
Given the relevance of this talk, maybe we'll just have the floor open to trainees to really let our voices be heard today.
Yes. So in terms of Title IX, or just get rid of it and allow the criminal justice system to take over?
I believe that students need special protections, whether that's on college campuses or starting in kindergarten where Title IX kicks in. But that's not how we're using it. I believe that Title IX is broken, and universities are pushing towards less reporting and making reporting so miserable. I believe that, however, that we can leverage parts of Title IX where we ask you, have you been found guilty of these sort of harassment behaviors? And I'd like to see sort of the narrative get flipped, that instead of abusing people with the Title IX process, that it becomes something more victim-driven and restorative. I don't think Betsy DeVos is the person to do that. Yeah. Yes.
So what do you do if, unfortunate circumstances that you are investigated by Title IX or, like your emails are called into question or anything like that? What are you supposed to do? What can you do as a victim?
Yeah, so as a victim, I think that that's part of the space that MeTooSTEM would like to occupy. That what we can do is intersect with you much earlier in this process so that you don't have to spend 3 years to get to a Department of Justice investigation that will only end up in more training. That if you come to us and say, listen, this is sort of a broad outline of my situation. I have a letterhead with some really scary people's names on it who have Nobel Prizes and they're the head of HHMI. And we all sign a letter to your supervisor, your chairman, your institute director, your dean. And it is a scary AF letter that says we have eyes on you and here are best practices. And that we continue this conversation with you, not with them. And how can we advocate for you? We keep you very keenly aware of what these time windows are for reporting so that if it does come to you needing to sue, you can at least know that we vetted some lawyers for you before you make that decision. But right now there is nothing between a miserable Title IX process and you having to get a lawyer for a lot of money up front. So we're trying to live in that space. We're also trying to live in that space in really practical ways in terms of doing questions with lawyers. We have AMAs where people can use suit accounts on Twitter and ask questions that they have. Yes.
Is there something that you'd like to see at the levels of laboratories and departments to push restorative justice or develop?
Yeah, so I think that one of the best things that I've seen in laboratories is sort of like a line in the sand sort of moment, right? Where it's like, I mean, I was talking at lunch about this. Like, yeah, we're still gonna party, and I'm gonna drink gin, and we're gonna go on the electrical, but that stuff is not happening. Like, no jokes, no hands, no nothing. And to have that as part of your culture is incredibly important. In terms of thinking about what it is that individuals in labs can do, we know that bystander training, while sexual harassment training doesn't work for people who are sexual harassers, bystander training is rock star. When you see another dude who's like, you know, well, she's a girl, of course she must have the gel. You punch him in the face. Okay, that's no. You do something else. You know, you have that conversation because you have less invested in that than a woman. And then you don't have to go to her and say, I got it, right?
So having allies who are participating in that dialogue, that's like, you know, let's not, wasn't it like a Budweiser commercial or something, you know? Like the cultural wilderness and, right, anyway. Yeah, so advocating in that way is really important. In terms of restoration, working with people who have been that you know have been victims of sexual assault, forming those collaborations, you know, trying to give a hand up, not a handout, is incredibly important. Yeah. Good question. Other stuff? Yes.
So you kind of touched on this a little bit in your talk, but obviously intersectionality, LGBTQ identities, or people of color, makes things a little bit more complicated. People were like get a little bit worse with it sometimes. So
A lot worse.
Well, a lot worse. So is there anything MeTooSTEM is doing specifically for these groups?
Yeah, so we're really thinking not about folks who are particularly vulnerable in terms of people of color, LGBTQ status, and individuals with disabilities, and doing more outreach in those communities. We'll definitely be putting more resources towards those cases, those individuals, because if we can't keep the most vulnerable safe, we won't keep anyone safe. That's absolutely a priority for us. As much as we can facilitate those conversations by being in spaces where queer folk talk, where there are conversations about accessibility and those kinds of things, that's absolutely a priority for us. Anybody else?
I'm not a trainee, but can I ask a very basic question?
I'm not a judge.
No one else is.
Okay.
That's true.
I think it might be on other people's minds. And I'm only asking this naively. When it's the case of sexual harassment, somebody being harassed at gunpoint, is there anything, any reason or anything that prevents the victim from reporting it to just regular police?
Oh, yeah, absolutely.
Which
I mean,
is-
when you call 911 on this campus, that's campus police. So your campus police here are trained by Davidson County and then paid by the university. So that's 911 for you. So the cops that show up are paid by Vanderbilt. You can keep calling 911 all you want, the same cops are gonna show up.
But from there on, it's not, the case is not taken up by Nashville Police, it's taken up by Vanderbilt, is that what you're saying?
So unless unless you specifically say, I want to press charges, then it doesn't.
So that's one alternative, then, to say, I want to press charges. If you want to have your case investigated by regular police, like any other case, like any other.
Yeah, so you
case.
can absolutely go to the district attorney and try to advocate. The problem is, how are you going to get that investigation done on a private university where everyone else is invested in their job here, not seeing your safety as the priority? They're thinking, I'm not gonna say anything about this campus because I'm up for tenure, or, because rarely do these things happen in isolation, right? I mean, the case of someone coming up to you and assaulting you, who is not affiliated with the universities, those become incredibly clear, right? We prosecute the heck out of those and advertise the heck out of them, right? But somebody who calls in and says, I was raped at a meeting by a professor, the news breaks those stories because a lot of people do the work to get Freedom of Information Act disclosed.